My dad kicked me out so my half-brother Derek could move in, but 6 months later they're begging me to lie to cover up his crime. If I do, they'll go to jail. Derek turned 18 about 4 months ago, and my dad kicked me out 6 months ago because Derek decided he was moving back here. He didn't want to rent a place like a normal person, so he wanted to live with my dad. Derek is my dad's son from his first relationship. However, Derek's mother and my dad broke up soon after he was born, so they didn't really have much of a relationship afterward. Derek is much closer to my dad than he is to his mother, so we spent a lot of time together growing up. He would often come over more often than was required legally as per his custody arrangement. I believe he was supposed to spend half of the month with my father. I remember being around him a lot, or maybe that was just my brain playing tricks on me because I hated spending time with him. My dad forced us together, and I know for a fact that he didn't like me much and saw me as a threat to him. My mother passed away a couple of years ago after a long battle with lung cancer, and that's when things started going downhill with me and my dad. I should mention that things have been bad between me and my dad has always been a bit strange towards me. Ever since I was a kid, he's treated me weirdly. It's like he doesn't want me around. He's always angry and yells at me for the smallest things. He never shows me any affection. Even when I try to win him over, it's like he doesn't care. He was cold, but with Derek he was a different person. When Derek was around the house, he would suddenly turn into the best father in the world and do everything that I wanted him to do with me. He made sure that he and I spent time together, even though both of us had made it very clear that we didn't like each other. Derek didn't like me because I was a threat, and I didn't like him because he would always bully me when I was a kid. He always tried to provoke me and push me around just because he could. He knew he could get away with it because my father never said anything when I complained to him about Derek being rough with me. He told me to suck it up and deal with it because that's how boys were supposed to play. He didn't want me to grow up to be a wimp. I thought that was my father wanted me to just suck it up and deal with it. I learned to do just that. I never fought back because I didn't want to upset my dad. I knew that fighting with Derek was one way of having him yell at me. It didn't matter if Derek was to blame or not. If I fought with him, I was always the one in the wrong. My dad never cared about the story. Whatever happened, I was the bad guy. It was pretty obvious that he had a favorite, and it wasn't me. Not even for a second did he find it weird that Derek was picking on me, even though I was a full 6 years younger than him. Then, he started changing his ways of bullying me because physically hitting me wasn't cutting it anymore. He was also growing up. So, when he started high school, he switched to bullying me with his friends instead. Before that, school had been my safe place because I was still in elementary school. When he was in middle school and we had different buildings, he couldn't get to me there. Once I started middle school, though, we were in the same building, and he and his friends were ganging up on me and making fun of me all the time. They even spread stupid, nasty rumors about me, like I was mentally challenged. The seniors knew that I was Derek's younger brother, and they made fun of me for it. They used to call me names, even slurs. It made things difficult for me because kids start middle school caring more about their reputation. Even friends I had from elementary school wouldn't speak to me because I wasn't cool enough to hang out with anyone. It wasn't until Derek graduated that I finally had the school to myself and could exist in peace. I did have a couple of friends, but most people just believed them. I let them get away with it because I was so tired of fighting all the time that I couldn't even argue with people at home. Things were just as bad as ever because Derek and my father would never miss an opportunity to put me down and make me feel like an idiot. The funny thing was that I wasn't even an idiot. I had pretty decent grades and I was great at science and stuff, but my dad and Derek was a football player, and he was actually a pretty great student, too. You can imagine how bad things must have been for me at home. Derek was everything I wasn't. Athletic, academically strong, and just the kind of son my father wanted. In comparison, I was average in every sense of the word. They never missed an opportunity to remind me of just how insignificant I was. My mother tried to defend me, but my father was a real sweet talker. He would convince my mother that they were just messing around with me and didn't mean anything they said. My mother was generally a nice and sweet person, but she was also really in love with my father. She never saw him for what he truly was. She would try her best to defend me, and I appreciated her for it, but it didn't work because it wasn't enough. I was lucky that my dad was usually on my side, but my mom was a real sweetheart. She was always quick to defend me, but my dad was a great talker. He would convince her that they were just joking around and didn't mean anything they said. My mom was a lovely person, but she was also head over heels in love with my dad. She never saw him for who he really was. She tried her best to defend me, and I was grateful for it, but it wasn't enough. My father and Derek kept on bullying me for as long as they could. Then Derek left for college, and I thought I could finally relax. My dad was still around, but he was a lot less annoying when the other jerk wasn't there. But before I could find out what it was like to live with my parents without Derek constantly picking on me, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. It was really hard for us to accept. We struggled to accept it because we felt like our world had shattered. The only thing that my father and I had in common was that we both loved our mother dearly. So her diagnosis really broke us both. Instead of making our family stronger, my dad decided that he was going to make the worst of this. My mother was already suffering, but now, instead of my father and I putting up a brave front for her, he started distancing himself from us. Even earlier, he would at least speak to me. It was to criticize me, but after my mom's diagnosis, he stopped even that and started acting like I didn't exist. I can understand why he did that because we were both suffering, and he just chose to deal with it in a different way. I would have preferred if my mom's situation brought us closer together somehow, but it didn't, and even if it could have, my dad was the kind of person who my dad would make sure that it didn't happen because, for some reason, he just hated me and couldn't bear the thought of me being happy. My mom's condition only got worse, and my dad's temper also started taking a toll on me. He would either not speak to me at all or ignore me completely. On other occasions, he was absolutely nasty to me. There were several occasions where he almost made me cry because of how rude he was being. I tried my best to keep the peace of the family by not responding to my father because I knew that it would just give him more of a reason to berate me and pick on me for the years that my mother was sick. I tried to keep the peace in the family by not responding to my father because I knew it would just give him more of a reason to berate me and pick on me for the years that my mother was sick. Whenever Dad would come back from college, he would lay off me, and I appreciated that he would not be nice to me, but at least he would be human, which was more than I could ask for. Things were bad when my mother was still around, but after my mother passed away, things got pretty rough for a while. My dad was pretty much unresponsive, but he did his share of the work around the house. He went to work, came back, and had dinner, but that was about it. I was starting to worry about him, so I reached out to my grandparents to tell them I thought my dad might be depressed, but they didn't take me seriously. It seemed like they either didn't care enough about their son to check up on him after the funeral or they just didn't like me. Just like my father, they didn't want to do as I said. After a few months, my father started coming to his normal self. Unfortunately, that also included binge drinking and making me feel like crap about myself. He would constantly order me to do stuff around the house, which was really tiring because I was going to school. But I was also doing all the work around the house, which my mother used to do earlier. Even when she was sick, my dad and I would manage to get all the work done. After her passing, though, all that responsibility came to me. I couldn't even protest because if I did, my father would tell me that I wasn't bringing home any money. So this was the least I could do to live here. It was really insulting, but I had nowhere else to go, so I just had to. I just had to put up with it for the longest time. The only thing I was looking forward to was going to college because that would mean I would finally be rid of my father and I wouldn't have to come back home anyway. I didn't even consider this place home anymore because once my mom was gone it stopped being home for me. Now I could have moved out and started living with my mom's parents after her. But they live really far away. I still had a year of school left, so that wasn't an option for me. Then, a couple of months ago, when my father found out that his golden child would be coming back home, he kicked me out anyway. I ended up moving to live with my grandparents. Derek had moved out for college a couple of years ago but hadn't returned to live here after that. After he graduated, he got a job there and decided to stay because his girlfriend wanted to stay there and make a life for themselves. Derek decided to stay with her since he was away from home. He would only come back for the holidays occasionally. About 2 years ago, he got married to his girlfriend because she was pregnant. They had just graduated when they found out, and it seemed like pretty perfect timing, so they decided to get married. I was invited to the wedding, and I was surprised because it was just for that one day. He didn't terrorize me. My mother was also present, despite her condition. She was there because everyone liked Derek. My mom and his mom weren't close. She was a bad mom. I say that because she didn't care about her kid or have a relationship with him. She was already in her fourth marriage by the time Derek got married. She seemed to be focused on being rich. She worked and earned her own money, but that was at the cost of her relationship with. I think that explains why Derek was so attached to our father. He pretty much only had one parent who cared about him, and of course he didn't want to share that parent with me. Anyway, my dad got married and soon after had a kid as well. They've been living happily there for the past 2 years, but I don't know why. For some reason, 6 months ago they decided to move back. My dad just informed me about it like 2 weeks before Derek was supposed to come home. My dad was supposed to come home. He was really smug about it, too. One day, he sat me down and told me that I needed to find a place to live because Derek was coming back, and I had to give up my room. We had 3 bedrooms, so I asked him why they couldn't just use the guest room. He said that Derek and his wife were going to live in the guest room and use my room as the nursery. It was apparently imperative that I left the house because I was already an adult in the making. I thought it was really unnecessary and selfish of my father to demand that I leave the house, together, just because he wanted to move back here with his family. I tried to fight with my father, but there was no talking to him because he had already made up his mind. He told me that I had 2 weeks to clear out, and after that, if I didn't leave, then he would. I knew there had to be a legal way to fight this and prevent it from happening, but at the time I didn't think of it. I was really panicked because I didn't trust my father and I knew he was capable of kicking me out without notice. I started looking for a place to live, but I didn't end up moving in with my grandparents because they lived so far away. It was far away and I still had to go to school. At the time, I didn't have any other options. There were just a couple of weeks of high school left, so I was willing to take that risk. I had moved out because I didn't want to be there when Derek came back with his wife and child. My father didn't seem to care when I moved out. He didn't even say goodbye to me the day I left. I had already packed up and was leaving with the movers when my grandparents came to pick me up in their truck. They were seriously considering confronting my father, but I convinced them it wasn't worth the hassle. 6 months have passed since that day, and I've been living with my grandparents. I haven't contacted my father since he kicked me out, and I don't intend to do so. I was supposed to start college in a couple of weeks, so I had that to look forward to. I had no reason to speak to my dad or Derek ever again, but they reached out to me because something had happened and they needed my help. They visited me a couple of days ago, which surprised me because I hadn't expected them to reach out to me at any point. My grandparents still let them in. I decided to have a chat with them because they seemed pretty desperate. I found out that Derek had come back here with his family because he'd lost his job and was struggling to make rent. He made the difficult choice of coming back here. His wife was all right with it because she wanted to be a stay-at-home mom and didn't want to work until their kid was a little older. So this was their best bet. When they came back, they thought they'd find work easily, but that wasn't the case. No companies were hiring at the time, and there were plenty of people with Derek's skill set looking for work too. He wasn't a standout candidate. My father managed to get him a job at the company he works for now. Neither of them was happy about it because it paid less than what Derek used to make, but they had to take it. They were trying to make the best of their situation, but as it turns out, Derek had been stealing from the company for a couple of months. It had finally come to light a few weeks ago. Now, my father and Derek are both in trouble because their employers think that they were in cahoots. They're threatening to file a lawsuit against them if they don't return the money soon. The only reason that they haven't been sued yet is because it's a family business. The company used to be a great friend of my mom's. It's only out of respect for her that he hasn't filed a lawsuit against them yet for embezzlement. But he's not going to wait any longer. My father and Derek wanted me to help them out. They wanted me to say that they needed the money for my college fund, which is why they had been stealing. It wasn't for their own personal gain. My father believed that this would make him take it easy on us and buy them some time to return the money. They would still get fired, but at least they wouldn't end up going to prison because of this. They were counting on me to help them out and paint the perfect picture of being a poor little victim. I couldn't believe that they had the audacity to ask something like this of me after the way they had treated me my entire life. I said no almost instantly without even considering it. He'd take it easy on us and give them some time to return the money. They'd still get fired, but at least they wouldn't end up going to prison because of this. They were counting on me to help them out and paint the perfect picture of being a poor little victim. I couldn't believe that they had the audacity to ask something like this of me after the way they had treated me their entire life. I said no almost instantly without even considering it because it was a ridiculous idea. It was a crazy idea, and I was pretty sure it wasn't going to work. Their plan was ridiculous, and I didn't want to be involved. When I told them I didn't want to be part of it, they got really agitated and said I had to help because there was a chance they'd end up in jail. I couldn't let a petty grudge ruin their lives. So I told them it wasn't just a petty grudge and that it wasn't from years ago. My father had only recently kicked me out, and I hadn't even been a year since then, so it was pretty recent. But that wasn't the main reason I didn't want to help them. I just thought their plan was really dishonest. I actually knew the guy my dad worked for. As I said, my mother and he were really good friends. My friend Derek and I were close. He and my mom had grown up together, and I used to call him my uncle when he came over. Even at my mom's funeral, we had a nice chat and hit it off. My mom had actually encouraged Derek to hire my dad when he was struggling. Instead of being grateful, Derek decided to try and embarrass these people. I thought it was really low, and I couldn't in good conscience be a part of this. I told them that it would be in their best interest if they just tried to pay off whatever amount they had stolen instead of trying to cover it up with more lies. I said that I wasn't going to be on their side here, and they might end up going to jail if they tried to. Fool him again. In fact, they should be grateful that they were being given a chance to pay that money off and get out of this without a lawsuit that they would definitely lose and that would ruin their future. They had no idea just how easy things were for them right now and exactly how complicated they could become if they decided to go through with their crazy plan. I tried to explain it to them, but my dad got really mad and said that he wasn't interested in hearing a sermon from me. If I wanted to help them, I'd agree to their plan instead of giving them advice that was useless. I told him I wasn't going to be involved and, to my surprise, my dad actually started crying. I'd never seen this before and it made me feel really uncomfortable. He said he'd been counting on me because I was his son. My dad said that no matter what had happened in the past, he would have helped me out if I was in a situation like this. He said that he expected the same of me because this was a huge deal and he really didn't want to go to prison. Derek felt the same way and he was begging me to help them out because he knew that I was well liked among my mom's friends and I was the only one who could build them. If my mom were still around, she'd probably have been able to smooth things over. But since she wasn't, I was the next best person to deal with it. They were counting on me. It was tough, but I still had to turn them down. I tried to get them to just come clean and repay what they owed. They got really upset and said that I was screwing them over because they used to mess with me when I was little. They were disappointed with how I've been dealing with things since they left. But I keep thinking about it and feeling guilty because I keep imagining them in jail. It just doesn't feel right, but at the same time I don't want to be involved in something illegal and immoral. It would be an insult to my mother because I'd be using her friendship and manipulating a really good friend of hers. I'm really conflicted right now about what I should do. Time is of the essence, so I don't have forever to wait for them to pay off their debts. I don't want to lie or cover up for my dad and my half-brother, who bullied me my entire life. I've made a decision, and I think I'm going to stick to it. Not only is it immoral and unethical, but it's not just unethical, it's also illegal. I don't want to be involved in something like this, so if my dad and Derek want to avoid jail time, they'll have to figure this out on their own. They're not in any immediate danger. They've been given the chance to make things right, repay the money Derek stole, and avoid damaging their reputation. They can choose to return the money and fix things. I have no reason to feel guilty about staying out of this. Many comments here said I shouldn't get involved because my father and Derek were terrible people and what they were doing was really horrible. I wouldn't be able to move on with this on my conscience like they would. It's clear we're not made of the same stuff and I wouldn't want to do something like this. I've chosen to stay out of it, and if they contact me after this, I'll block them. They're already blocked everywhere, but I'm sure they'll use different numbers or social media accounts to get to me. My grandparents also think I'm doing the right thing by staying out of this because they made this mess, so now they have to clean it up. It doesn't make sense to expect anything. Update 2. My father reached out to me today via text message, just as I had anticipated. It has been 8 days since he last visited, and we have not spoken since I mentioned that he used a different number that I did not recognize to call me. I answered the call, but I hung up almost immediately upon hearing my father's voice. I heard his voice on the other end, but I was a little too slow in blocking him. He was able to text me, and I received it. He messaged me saying that he knew I didn't want to discuss this any further. He and Derek were in trouble and really needed my help. Their employer was threatening them every day to return the money or else he would file a lawsuit against them. I felt really guilty about it, but I texted him back and told him that I wouldn't be helping him. I said he should look for other ways to return the money instead of running away from the problem. Then I blocked him. I hope he understands where I'm coming from. Even if he doesn't, I just hope that he does the right thing. I would hate to have a father in prison. I haven't heard back from my father yet, but my grandparents told me that they'd reached out to my mom's friend, the CEO, to ask what he was planning to do. We hadn't contacted him before because he's a busy man, and we didn't want to bother him. But we needed to know what was going on, and speaking to my father or Derek wasn't an option anymore. So my grandpa spoke to him, and he told us, he said he was still planning on filing a lawsuit if he didn't receive the money back in a couple of months. He told us that he was willing to let it all pass because of his friendship with my mother, but he couldn't forgive the debt. I respected that he was being way more lenient than most people would have been in a situation like this. He even apologized to me and told me that he was sorry that this was happening to me. I told him it was no big deal since I don't even live with my father anymore. I think he kind of deserves this, so we'll see what happens. My dad is clever enough to know he should pay the amount back somehow so he doesn't end up in jail. It'll take a while, but I'm sure they'll do it, and I have nothing to worry about. I also had a long chat with my mom's friend. He told me that my mother had spoken to him before she passed away. She said that if I ever wanted to intern somewhere for some quick cash, or maybe if I just wanted a job in general, his door would always be open. I'll keep that in mind going forward, even after she's gone. It's nice to know that my mom is still looking out for me.